Grants are a lot. Trying to find the right grant, applying, reading all of the paperwork, all of that really is a lot. Another misconception that people have is that there are no funding for profit businesses. Before I say yes to a client, we have an in-depth conversation. I need to know, how much money can you handle?
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, let's get it started. Hey guys, we are at another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm going to be your host today. And in our studio, we have Crystal Petry. Crystal, how are you?
I am good, Rick. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, I'm excited about this conversation. It's funny, guys, we're going to talk about grants and business grants in particular, but, other grants as well. But, this was one of those conversations I remember having 30 times. There are no grants for business, but you know what? Crystal's going to bust that myth. I promise you. So if you haven't done it already, do me a favor, like, subscribe, hit the bell, get some updates every time we drop a new episode, and we will keep you in the know. Okay. All right, without further ado, let's get to it. Crystal, so tell us who you are, what you do, why you do what you do.
Okay, that's a lot of questions. Who am I? I am Crystal Petry. What do I do? I write grants, I research grants. I also am a trainer of grants. Basically, I am a lover of all things grants. Why do I do what I do? I do this because I know firsthand through lived experiences how powerful grants are. And I want to make sure that I empower people with that power as much as possible.
I love it. I love it. For somebody that's listening to this episode, what's the most important thing you want them to get out of it?
I want people to know that it is possible for you to receive grant funding. There is steps, of course, to that end goal, but the end goal of receiving funding is possible for you.
That's super encouraging. I remember the first time we had that conversation, I was really like, what, really?
Yes, yes.
That is cool. That is very, very cool. That's what's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about grants when it comes to, going out, pursuing it and actually getting them?
I would say, honestly, Rick, I don't know if it's a misconception, but most people feel like grants are a lot, and they would absolutely be correct. Grants are a lot. Trying to find the right grant for you and your situation, applying for that grant, reading all of the paperwork that they send, all of that really is a lot. And most people feel that way about grants, and they are not wrong. I think if I had to pick a misconception, Rick, it would be that they cannot get grants. That's the misconception, because there are grants out there for you. So if I had to pick something, I would say that most people feel like they can't get grants. And that's the misconception. That's the fallacy.
Yeah, I can certainly, I would fall in that camp, but I'm not as methodical and meticulous as you are. I'm more of a strategist, and it's like every time we talk, I'm like, wow, she's just so. I love
Thank
that.
you.
I know it translates into everything that you do. It's just like you were absolutely spot on. So how did you get into this? I mean, this is, I don't meet a lot of grant writers. So what was your driver? What happened?
This is what happened. I have my undergrad and I have my graduate degree. My undergrad is in communications with an emphasis on broadcasting. My graduate degree is communications and leadership. Basically, I wanted to work in television. Okay.
Mm.
So, and I did that. I accomplished that. I worked for an NBC television station. I was the executive producer of a morning show, fill-in reporter. So I was able to accomplish what I wanted to do. Several years into that, people change, things change, goals change. And I decided that I was no longer interested in that anymore. And I started looking for just something different. And had someone call me. Her name is Erica. She called me and she said, I have the perfect job for you. Call, submit your resume, yada, yada, yada. Did all of that, got the job. The job was working for a nonprofit company.
Mm.
And in the nonprofit company, everything is done through grants. Salary is done through grants, fringe benefits, which would be like your paid vacation, your paid sick time, all of that paid through grants. The rent on the building, light, water, gas, everything is paid through grants.
Mhm.
And before I got this job, I maybe had heard of grants. I really wasn't sure. I can't honestly say that I had heard of grants or not heard of grants before I start working at this company. But once I got there, I just dove head first into it, learning everything that I could about grants, gleaning all of the information from my directors and supervisors and even people outside of the state about grants. And I just realized how powerful grants are. I realized what they can do for a person individually, what they could do for a household, what they could do for a family, what they could do for a company. And I was just amazed. And it was something that I grew to love because I am a competitor at heart. I love sports. I played sports as a child. I still watch sports and scream at the TV like a lot of us do. So it's really when you come down to it, it's competitive writing grants, looking for grants, researching grants. It really comes down to being competitive in that space. And I have continued to educate myself on it. I've continued to grow and I've continued to work in that space.
Wow. Wow.
Hopefully that wasn't too long of an answer, but that's the gist of how I got into grant writing.
I'm sorry, that was the gist, or is that
Yeah, I
I'm just
know,
kidding with
right?
it.
That was the gist. That was the gist of it.
Okay. Okay. Cool. 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 It was interesting while you were talking about that. You were talking about the different needs that the not for profit had, or the not for profit company had, and you listed them out individually, and you kind of gave me the impression that there are different types of grants for different needs in an organization. Is that an accurate statement?
That is an accurate statement. There are several different grants for different needs, or there's also grants that will supply different needs under one grant. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So, yes, there are several grants that people can get to supply different needs and different wants in their company. Or you can find a grant you can find a singular grant that will supply several different needs. So it really just depends on what you're looking for, what you're wanting.
How do you go about finding the right grant? I mean, it's like if an organization comes to you and says, "Hey, Crystal, we're looking for grants." I imagine, and I don't know that this is the case, but is it like they would come to you and just say, "Okay, a blanket statement, hey, I need a grant," or they say specifically, "Hey, I need a grant for research and development," or "I need a grant for, something else."
They would come to me, yes, with the blanket statement, Crystal, we're looking for a grant. I'm looking for a grant. But from there, I really peel back. Why are you looking for a grant? How much are you looking for? What are you wanting to do with the funding? Because anyone can go to Google and type in grants and you will get millions and millions of search results. But you have to be very specific on why you're looking for grants, how much money you are needing. When do you need the grant? Do you need it right now? Can you wait 6 months?
Mm,
What are you wanting to do with that money? What is your mission? What is your vision?
mm,
So the blanket statement starts the conversation, but it definitely does not end there. And once I receive as much information as possible from, the client, that's when I go in and I start looking in specific places for grants that match the criteria and match the information that they have given me.
mm.
And a lot of people, that's their automatic question, Rick. I'm looking for grants. But
Yeah.
once I start speaking to them and asking very detailed, very open ended questions, then they realize it's like a light bulb moment that, yes, I'm looking for grants, but this is why I'm looking for grants. So it's not just the blanket statement, it's so much more to it than that.
Wow. Wow. That's interesting. How much, and I'm assuming that the amount of time varies, but I mean, how much time on average do you spend like just doing, research?
Wow, it varies depending on the client, what their needs are.
Yeah.
But I would venture to say, and of course, this is just my own personal opinion, that the research part of grants is one of the more longer parts of it when dealing with grants, because there are so many grants out there, so many funders, so many organizations that are wanting to help. And that's really what it boils down to. These funders, these people are wanting to help, but they're very specific and they're very detailed about what they want to help, how they want to help. So you really have to find, I jokingly call myself a matchmaker in this situation because that's basically what I'm doing. I'm matching the funder to the fundee and trying to make a match between the two. So you're looking at these funders, you have your client that needs this funding. Now you have to go in and match the two together.
That makes sense. That makes sense. What is the, I guess, the oddest or the most unexpected grant project that you worked on?
Most unexpected grant project that I worked on. Okay, this one is a good one. This one was several years ago, and I was working with an at risk teenager boys. And at that time, I was still working with grants and undergrants for the same company,
Hmm.
but this was a little bit outside of just our directly working in grants. So, at risk teenage boys that were from all over the state of Texas. And I would go in and teach um a curriculum. I was trying to think of the name of the curriculum, which escapes me right now, but an evidence-based curriculum to help them make better decisions, which when it boils down to it, Rick, we all need that curriculum. We all need to learn how to make better decisions, not just the at-risk teenage boys. We all need that curriculum. But so I'm teaching this curriculum. The classes are coming to an end, and I wanted to do something special for these group of boys. They were amazing. They showed so much growth, so much potential. I believed in them wholeheartedly.
Hmm.
So one of the things I did several things, but one of the things that I wanted to do was get them shirts that just really showcase that, we did this, we went through this curriculum, we've grown, we're making better decisions, and just be proud and bold about that.
Yeah, I love that.
And one of the things that I did was I went to a private foundation. Now, at this point in time, with the grants, I am only working with federal grants, meaning money that's coming from the federal government, Washington, D.C. I'm
Mhm.
also working with state grants. I had not worked with private foundations, but in this capacity, federal grants are not going to fund something like that. State grants are not going to fund something like that. But a private foundation, they would absolutely fund something like that. Went to private foundations, researched that, and was able to write a grant to a private foundation that purchased shirts for all of these teenage boys that I was working with. They paid for the shirts, they paid for the designs, they paid for the small, medium, large, extra large, because all of those are separate prices. They paid for everything under the grant. And that one was a unique grant at that time because it was my first time working with a private foundation, first time writing a proposal for a private foundation, first time writing something for what some people might not consider significant, but I consider very significant, was t-shirts boldly proclaiming that, for these boys, they were amazing, they were successful, they could make great, decisions and choices with the information presented to them. And it was a huge deal for these teenage boys, Rick. And I didn't tell them that I was doing it, partly because I didn't know if I would be able to do it. But they loved the shirts. They were like putting them on like over the clothes. They wrote me like letters and thank yous, and it was just amazing. The letters that they wrote me brought me to tears. They were just so sincere. It was amazing. Like, just thinking about it now, I'm just reliving that moment. It was amazing and it was unique, and I enjoyed the entire experience of that.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. It's
Yes.
I guess I kind of get to live that a little bit. That's I can just picture that happening and the boys and the excitement and all that good stuff.
Yes.
It made me think. So I mentioned I'm working on starting a not for profit, a mentorship program. And so we're really in the concept stage. We're developing the concept. We know that we're going to need to raise money. We got to
Yes.
pay salaries and develop content and all of that. At what point would it make sense to have a conversation with you? And what would it look like to say, okay, we need to raise $50,000 to get this thing off the ground?
I think when you're dealing with a grant writer, you're dealing with fundraising, that conversation needs to be had at the very, very beginning, because it will allow you to dictate so many other things within the company. If you are needing money for salary, then your grants would dictate how many people you can bring on salary. It'll also dictate, is this going to be a full-time person? Is this going to be a part-time person? Is this going to be a contract person? It'll also dictate supplies, how much supplies, you would need to purchase or you would have the money to purchase. It would also dictate how long you can have this, you can have your nonprofit mentorship. If you find a grant that's willing to, like a multi-year grant, which are my favorites, because when you deal with a multi-year grant, you can actually start writing that into your budget. If you find a multi-year grant that's willing to fund you for 3 years or 4 years, that's your budget. Now I'm going to have this program for at least 3 years. I'm going to have this program for at least 4 years. And I'm just specifically, in this scenario, talking about one grant.
Mhm.
But if you find one grant, that will fund you for 3 years, you find another grant that'll fund you for 1 year, you find another grant that'll fund you for 2 years, you have almost 5 to 6 years of a budget that you can build on. You can hire more people, you can hire more help, you can get a building and furnish that building. And so many things that you can do or perhaps not do depending on the grants and depending on your budget.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know it was that extensive. That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing, and there's money out there for all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just thinking about you asked a great question earlier in our conversation, Rick, about misconceptions. Another misconception that people have is that there are no funding for profit businesses.
Yeah, that's gonna be my next question, actually. Yeah.
Yes, there is absolutely funding for profit businesses out there, just like there's funding for nonprofit businesses as well. So that would be another misconception that a lot of people have.
But what kind of grants are available for-profit organizations?
I can't think of any specifically off the top of my head right now,
Uh-huh.
but there are several grants out there for profit businesses. Again, all you have to do is go to Google, which is our best friend at this point in time, and type in for profit grants, and you will get millions and millions of results. One
Wow.
of my clients I'm working with right now, for profit,
Uh-huh.
she's looking for vehicles for her for-profit organization, and I'm in the process of writing a grant for her for a for-profit organization for company vehicles. So again, you gotta really get down to the minutia when dealing with grants, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, to find and research grants that are willing to fund your mission, that are willing to fund your vision.
Interesting, interesting. How I guess in depth is that paperwork? What are some things that typically qualify or disqualify an organization?
Let's see, it gets very, very detailed. And it gets very detailed the more money you are requesting. The
Okay.
more money you are requesting, they are going to want more information from you.
Hmm.
Because again, these are, funders, whether you're dealing with federal money, state money, private foundations. If you're asking for $1 million, $500,000, I understand that the amount of money is very subjective to whoever I'm talking to.
Hmm.
But if you're asking for like $1 million, $10 million, they are going to want to know every single thing about you, including the color of your eyes. I'm being facetious with that one. But they really want to know a lot of information. Now, if you are asking for money on the lower end, and again, I know, the amount of money is very subjective depending on who I'm talking to, but if
uh,
you're asking for money that's like $1,000, $5,000, they're going to want some information, just not as much. Because relatively speaking, $5,000, $1,000 is not a lot of money.
right, right.
To answer the second part of the question, what gets companies disqualified? It simply is because people don't read the grants. They like skim over it. They don't read every aspect of what the funder is wanting. Sometimes funders will put in there, use this font, and people don't use that font. Sometimes funders will say, use size 12 font. They don't use that font. Sometimes funders will say use Arial font type or use it's another one I can't think at the top of
Font
my head. It
height.
starts with the T. But anyways, they will say whenever applying for this grant, I want you to use this specific font type. People don't read it and they don't do it and you get disqualified because you use size 14 font instead of 12 or you use some fancy font instead of Arial font. So it's the little things like that that get people disqualified simply because they did not read and follow the instructions to a T.
Wow, wow, wow. That's amazing. What
Mhm.
what kind of I guess record keeping is required? We did I was with one organization, and the grant that was provided for the organization was only allowed to be used for like a certain program that this funder wanted to, but like it couldn't be used for like anything else. I mean, is that typical?
Absolutely. That is absolutely typical because the funder is only going to fund what they want to fund. And
Hmm.
because it's their money, they are at liberty to decide what we are going to fund. So if we are looking at a grant and the funder only wants to help you grow trees, for example, if it's an environmental fund and they only want to help you grow trees, I'm going to give you, or the funder is going to give you the money to do everything you need to grow trees. They are not going to give you money to grow rose bushes or to grow sunflowers. They just want their money used for growing trees. So, yes, the funder absolutely gets to dictate where that money is used. Sometimes the funder will say, you can use this money to pay salaries, nothing else, just salaries. Or they'll say, you can use this money to pay your light bill, nothing else, just the light bill.
Hmm.
And you have to have documentation to prove that their money, the 25,000, the 10,000 that they gave you went specifically for the light bill or
Hmm.
went specifically for growing trees, whatever that looks like. You have to have the paperwork and the documentation because believe me, when I tell you they are going to come back and want that information to prove that this is where their money was spent.
What happens if you don't spend it on that?
You have to pay it back.
That's
You
incentive
have
right
to
there.
pay it back. Now, and this is why I always say grant money is free-ish. It's
Free-ish.
free-ish. And I feel like I need to patent that because yes, I am giving you all this money, Rick, for your mentorship program down in Florida. We think it's amazing, but I want something back for that money.
Yeah.
And normally, what the funder wants back is your numbers. How many people did you serve, Rick? How many boys did you serve? How many girls did you serve? What were their ages? What is the documentation that shows their growth from when they first stepped into your classroom until they graduated? They want all that information because what they're going to do with that data, Rick,
Hmm.
is include that in their data. Then they're going
Yeah.
to go and say to their board or their stockholders, look at all of these teenage boys that we helped. And truly they did because they gave you the money to do it. But also, if you don't spend the money the way they said to spend the money, they will file charges. And I've seen this happen so many times. They can file charges. It is an illegal offense. You can go to jail. They will make you pay that money back. A lot of times they will make you pay that money back and interest on top of that. So your
Amazing.
safest bet is to do exactly what the funder is asking you to do.
Are there people that do, perhaps on a fractional level, like grant management? So like you get the grant for them and then they monitor to make sure that the paperwork is done, it's being used for the right reasons, it's, sent back to the funder. Are there people that do that?
There are absolutely people that do that. I actually, and this is a shameless plug, I absolutely do that in one of my packages with my consulting firm.
Hmm.
I do that. But yes, to answer your question, there are people that a lot of companies will hire to keep them out of the weeds with grants because it's very easy to do, especially if you have money coming from separate grantors. If you're dealing with 5 and 6 different funding streams and all different funders are wanting different information and wanting you to spend their money in different areas, you absolutely, I mean, it's not a requirement, Rick,
Hmm.
but in my professional, educated opinion, you definitely need help with that,
Hmm.
especially if you're dealing with more than one grant at a time. You
Hmm.
need someone to be able to separate this dollar from that dollar. You need someone to be able to track the $10 over here and track the $20 over there. So you absolutely need help with that. And then the reporting. I was speaking about the data that these funders want back.
Yeah.
You have to have someone to gather that data, calculate that data, and then turn it in, because they always want you to turn it in, monthly or quarterly or yearly, whatever they're asking for. They want that data. So, yes, you need help. It's not required, but I strongly suggest that you get help.
So, but I mean, that's not, but I can write that into my grant though, can't I?
Absolutely. And in the grant, a lot of funders are going to ask, they're not going to ask it this way, but that's basically what it boils down to. Who's helping you? Who's helping you? Do you have a secretary? Do you have an administrative assistant? Do you have a finance person? Do you have an executive director? Do you have an accountant? Do you have a CPA? Who is helping you with this money? Okay. And some funders will require that you have help. And again, that goes back to, if you're asking for $1 million, $10 million, those funders are going to require that you have somebody helping you.
But
So within your proposal, Rick, they are asking, who's helping you? Do they have a degree? Do they have experience? How are they benefiting this funding that we are giving you? And you have to, some funders will want a resume for each person that is going to be working under that grant, for each person that is going to be helping you. Send us a resume on that person. And then some funders will say, send us a resume and then write a 2-page or a 2-paragraph on how that person's skills benefits this grant.
wow, wow, wow.
So yeah,
That's
it can be a lot.
never even considered that. That's amazing. That's
Mhm.
amazing. So, if someone wanted to find besides you, if someone wanted to, and not excluding you, of course, but if someone
Right, absolutely.
wanted to work with a grant writer, I mean, how do you recommend they go about that process?
Unless you just know a grant writer, which, as you stated accurately at the beginning of this conversation, Rick, most people don't just know grant writers. You don't have them saved in your phone, or you don't have their email that you could just reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking for a grant. I would say the easiest way would be to, again, Google grant writers. You can also ask around, because, 6 degrees of separation, you never know who knows someone. So start by asking friends, coworkers, hey, I'm looking for a grant writer. Do you know someone? And most people would be like, no, but I can ask so and see if they know someone.
Yeah.
And it kind of trickles back to you. Also, like your chamber of commerce, they may have grant writers, maybe your Better Business bureaus, they may have grant writers as well.
Hmm.
So I would say start there. Start with your Chamber of Commerce, call them or email them, whatever that contact looks like, and ask if they have grant writers that are within the membership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go to your Better Business Bureau, ask them, do they have grant writers within the membership? And then go to trusted people that that's in your circle, and say, hey, Rick, do you know a grant writer? And Rick may say, I don't know a grant writer, but let me ask, someone, they might know a grant writer. So those would be my suggested first 3 ways. And then, of course, there's always Google. Type in Google, try and be as specific as possible.
Mhm.
Because again, you type in grant writer into Google, you're going to get so many results. But, try and be as specific as you can to narrow down those results that you get if you do decide to go the Google route.
So, I mean, so if we look at it from the perspective of locale, I mean, you're in Texas. I'm in
Yes.
Georgia. Would it make sense for me to call you, or should I find someone that's local to me?
That's such a great question, Rick. And I think it really just boils down to your preference. Because even though I'm in Texas, grant writing is not location specific. So I can be in Texas and write a grant for someone in California and write a grant for someone in North Dakota and then write a grant for someone in North Carolina. So it's not location specific. You can write grants from wherever you are to wherever. When I say wherever, I'm speaking specifically about the United States of America. So specifically in this country, you can write a grant from wherever. But some people, maybe they want someone that's more close in proximity to them,
Hmm.
for whatever reason, then yes, if you're in Georgia, look for your grant writer in Georgia, which is, one of the reasons I said go to your local chamber of commerce, go to your local Better Business Bureau, ask a friend, and most likely within those three options, someone knows a grant writer or can direct you to a grant writer that might be closer to you than, say, I would in Texas and you're in New York or Virginia or something like that.
Okay. And it's in terms of compensation. You had mentioned before. You have packages. How do grant writers typically, or what are different ways, I should say, grant writers get compensated for their work? Because I mean, you scared me, absolutely scared me when you started talking about research, and then you started talking about details. And I'm just like, hey, I'm calling Crystal.
Well, hopefully, Rick, our conversation will keep people from being as nervous and as scared when it comes to grants. Because again, at the beginning of the conversation, one of your questions, which is a great question, is, what's the goal for this conversation? And it's to let people know that you can secure grants. You really, really can. But as far as the compensation, it's so different for grant writers. And, this is something I get all the time. And it's a great question. It's not a, question that I'm afraid to answer. People will go and do their research, which I encourage. Do your research. And they will say, well, this grant writer charges this, or this company charges that. And I always say that I cannot speak to why or how another grant writer or an agency charges what they charge
Yeah.
compared to what I charge. What it really comes down to, Rick, is your budget. What is it that you can afford? And does their pricing make sense for you? That's what it really comes down to. Does their pricing make sense for you? If you're working with me, does my pricing make sense for you? Is this something that you can afford to pay, whether that's with me or another grant writer or another agency?
I find that, and I apologize if it sounds off, but I mean, I find it weird because it's I would think that the number of grants, for example, if you were going to say, okay, I'm going to guarantee you 10 submissions per month, or whatever that I really don't have context here, but I'm going to promise you 10 submissions, and somebody else says has a different number, or somebody else says, hey, I'm going to charge you 8% of whatever I recover. It seems as though there's got to be some way to make an intelligent decision, between your grant writers. Even the win percentage, I can guarantee you, one, I don't even, again, I don't have context for this, but
Mhm.
I can guarantee that we can raise, your annual budget? You know, I mean, how do is there is that a realistic approach? What I'm saying, like in terms of like trying to like level the playing field and then being able to, you know, make a decision about who to hire.
That is a great question, Rick. And what I will tell you is, again, there are so many grant writers out there, so many amazing grant writers. I'm always going to toot the horn for grant writers because, of course, I'm in that space. But, when it comes to grant writers, again, you have to do your research. And, if they're saying, hey, I can guarantee you 10 submissions of grants within the month or 2 months, you really have to look at what is it that you, as the client, as the nonprofit, as the for-profit, as the entrepreneur, what is it that you are wanting? Because if you are an entrepreneur, meaning, it's just you right now, it's just you running everything. A grant writer comes to you and says, hey, I can promise you 10 submissions in the month. What happens if you get all 10 of those grants? Which, most people that's listening would be like, man, that's amazing. I would be so excited. I'd be so happy. You would, until you have to do all that paperwork by yourself, until you have to separate all that money by yourself, until you have to get on all those Zoom calls by yourself because some funders want to see your face and talk to you once a month. And if you have 10 streams of funding and they all want to talk to you once a month, every day you on a Zoom call.
Yep. 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 Yep.
So it really depends on what you as the client, what you want, what you can handle.
Yeah.
So if it's just you by yourself and somebody says, I can guarantee you 10 submissions a month, you have to step back and think as a business owner, if I get 10 grants, can I handle that by myself? If I get 5 of those grants, can I handle that by myself?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you have another grantor that comes to you and says, you know what, I can promise you that I'm going to submit 2 grants for you per month. Think about, okay, if I'm by myself, if I'm an entrepreneur, I get 2 grants submitted for me and I actually get those 2 grants. Can I handle that? That seems a little bit more doable. I think I'm going to go with the grantor who says I can guarantee you 2 grants per month, as opposed to the grantor that says I can guarantee you 10 grant submissions per month. So it really depends on, this is where you have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because so many people, they're like, I want all the grant money I can get. Okay, what happens if you get all the grant money you can get? Like, can you handle that? Because if you can't, remember the blowback that can happen.
Yeah.
That can make you repay all that money. And a lot of times they're going to put interest on it.
Yeah.
They can file charges on you. You can possibly go to jail. So you really have to be honest with yourself and say, right now, I think what I can handle is $5,000. What I can handle is $10,000. And a lot of that comes from conversation. For me, before I say yes to a client, we have an in-depth conversation. I need to know, how much money can you handle? Yes, you want $100,000? Do. Can you handle what comes along with $100,000 in grants? So you really, before you as the client say yes to a grantor, you need to be able to talk to them and hear what they have to say and ask questions, just like the questions you're asking on this, on during our conversation, Rick. Ask questions. And a lot of people will say, I don't know what I don't know, meaning I don't know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
I would recommend, and this is a plug for you, Rick, listen to this conversation, because the questions that you are asking, Rick, are excellent questions that you need to ask a grant a grant writer.
Mhm.
The questions that you've been asking have been amazing, and they're great examples on questions that you need to ask a grant writer.
Some awesome, brilliant response. Thank you so much for that. That was great. You teach people how to write grants, and you've got some workshops coming up. Let's talk about that.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for bringing this up, Rick.
Absolutely.
Again, it goes back to me wanting to empower my clients. So whether you are like a client that, you hire me and you want me to research grants for you or write grants for you or the coaching, consulting, in every aspect of that, I'm giving you information. And that's the exact same thing that I am doing with this grant training. And my first grant training, it's going to be a virtual grant training, August 21st. Everything's going to be done online. I am empowering you to secure your grants, to go out and research your own grants, to go out and write your own grants, to go out and secure your own grant funding. And so most people will be like, it seemed like you giving away your job. Okay. I don't feel that way. I want people to be empowered, Rick, when it comes to grants. There is so much power in grants and receiving grant funding, and people just do not know. They are not aware of it. They don't understand it. It's a lot, and it is. But with this grant training that I'm doing under my company, Crystal Petry Consulting, I am going to take away the myths. I'm going to take away the fear. I'm going to take away the unknown. And when you finish with my boot camp, you will be able to go out and write a grant for yourself, for your company, whether that's a nonprofit company or a for profit company, or you are a solopreneur, you will be able to go out and write grants. And one of the things that I'm asking people who want to register for the virtual grant training, bring a grant. Like if you already have a grant that you are working on or you are struggling with, bring that grant. By the end of the boot camp, that grant will be at least 85%, 90% completed.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's going to be
yes, I
amazing.
am doing that, a grant training. Thank you so much for asking about it. The first one is going to be August 21st, 2025, and then it will be quarterly after that. So the next one will be November 2025, February 2026, May 2026. So you have ample time and opportunity and space to ask the questions that Rick is asking and for me to teach you what questions you need to be asking as well.
Amazing. Amazing. And how do people register for it?
Everything is on my website. And all you have to do, again, go to Google, type in Crystal Petry Consulting, and it will bring you to my website. Go to my website and you can register. You can register right now, as you're listening to this conversation, as you're listening to Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. Go there and register right now.
Love that. Love that. And if somebody has questions or wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Again, go to my website. It has my phone number on there. It has my email on there. It has a contact us on there. When I'm doing interviews, I'll let people know. As I feel like when people are listening to a podcast, they're like doing something. They're working out, they're doing grocery, they're cleaning the house, whatever they're doing. So, me giving a phone number might be, just not at the right time for them, or me giving a website is not at the right time for them. And sometimes it's hard to write down a phone number really quick or write down a website really quick. So I always tell people, go to Google, type in my name, it'll pull up my website. On my website, it has my direct phone number, it has my email, it has a contact us. You can schedule some time to speak with me as well if you have questions about grants. You can go to my website and do all of that. Just type in my name, Petry Consulting, and it'll pull all of that information up for you.
Fantastic, fantastic. And we will make sure we have all that information on your show notes page.
Yay, Rick!
Want people to reach out to you. Want people to reach out to you. Thank you so much. This has been very educational for me and scares the crap out of me. I'll never write a grant in my life, but thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for your amazing questions, Rick, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about grants, which is something that I love.
Awesome.
So it's
awesome.
a win-win.
Awesome. My pleasure. And folks, thank you for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. Keep winning.